It happens in an ordinary moment, one that doesn't seem important enough to linger on. Someone asks if you'll be around later, sometime soon, and before you answer, your body reacts. A small tightening, a hesitation that feels physical rather than thoughtful. You give a vague reply, something that keeps options open, and the moment passes. The relief comes immediately. Not joy, just a soft release. Like you avoided something that would have cost you more than it offered. You don't think about it much at first. It feels practical. You have things to manage, time to protect. But later, alone, the moment returns. Not the words, those were harmless, but the feeling. The sense that saying yes too clearly would have started something you didn't want to carry. That it would have set a rhythm you'd be expected to maintain. There's no obvious reason for this reaction. The person didn't ask for much. They weren't demanding. Still, closeness registers as weight. Not emotional, intensity, responsibility. The kind that grows quietly once it's allowed. You don't see yourself as someone who avoids people. You show up, you're pleasant, you care. But you keep noticing how often your instinct is to step back just as something begins to solidify. To create space before anything becomes fixed. It's subtle enough that no one points it out, including you. There's a thought you rarely let finish itself, because when it does, it sounds harsher than you feel inside. If I let people get too close, I'll lose control over my life. Not because they'll hurt you, but because they'll rely on you. You don't say this out loud. It sounds selfish, so you dress it up in better language, boundaries, capacity, timing. All of those are true, but they circle something more uncomfortable. Being needed feels dangerous. Once someone counts on you, leaving stops being simple. You can't just adjust your distance without explanation. You can't disappear without consequence. You've learned how dependency forms. It doesn't arrive as a request. It builds through repetition. Showing up once turns into showing up again. Availability becomes assumed, and suddenly you're part of someone else's stability. The idea that unsettles you isn't abandonment, it's permanence. The thought that someone might expect you to remain the same person over time, that you'll have to perform continuity, even when you're changing, so you keep the thought to yourself. You tell yourself you're just independent, self-directed, careful with your energy. But underneath, there's a quiet calculation happening. How close is too close? And how early do I need to step back to keep my life intact? You once believed connection would eventually stop feeling so heavy, that there would be a point where relationships settled into something steady, something that didn't require constant adjustment. You assumed adulthood would bring clarity, that you'd know where you belonged. That closeness wouldn't feel like something you had to manage or escape from. You didn't expect it to feel like an ongoing negotiation. Instead, time made things feel tighter. Every commitment seemed to subtract from something else. Every relationship asked for maintenance, checking in, showing up, aligning schedules, aligning moods. You didn't expect people to want more certainty as life went on, to ask where things were headed, to expect consistency. Those questions didn't feel grounding. They felt like deadlines. You thought by now you'd feel more settled. Instead, you feel alert, like too many things could tip at once if you're not careful. Like closeness has the power to reorganize your life without asking. So you adjusted quietly. You became selective. You learned how to keep things light enough to move if you had to. Not because you wanted less connection, but because you couldn't find a way to have it without losing something essential. This feeling doesn't arrive once, it repeats, even if the details change. New places, new people, a sense of openness at the beginning. Then, slowly, the same shift. Someone expects regularity. A relationship develops rhythm. And without anything going wrong, Your body starts preparing for distance. You feel restless, drained by small interactions. You imagine pulling back just a little so you can breathe again. When you do, the relief confirms the instinct. Space works. Each time feels justified on its own. This situation is different. This person wants too much. This phase of a life requires focus, but the shape is familiar. You build connection carefully, then step away before it deepens, over and over. Different years, same motion. Occasionally the pattern becomes visible to you. You notice how many people exist in your life only as partial stories. People you didn't mean to lose, but didn't know how to stay with. You don't sit with that thought long. You keep moving, but the repetition remains, quietly shaping your world, one controlled distance at a time. Because of this tension, you've learned how to leave without making it obvious. You don't disappear suddenly. You let things loosen gradually. Messages take longer to answer. Plans stay tentative. Conversations end a little earlier than they used to. You're careful with your availability, not because you're unavailable, but because availability has consequences. The more reliably you show up, the harder it becomes to step back later without explanation. When a relationship starts to expect consistency, you adjust. You become slightly harder to reach, less spontaneous, still kind, still responsive, just distant enough that the rhythm changes on its own. You keep different parts of your life separate, not out of secrecy, but out of control. No one has enough access to feel entitled to your time. No one sees the full shape of your days. There's skill in this. You know how to exit cleanly, how to make it feel circumstantial instead of personal. And when space returns, you feel calmer, clearer. That relief teaches you something important. It teaches you that leaving works. At some point, your mind learned that closeness could become a trap, not because people were cruel, but because responsibility arrived without choice. Being needed wasn't optional. Staying wasn't something you consented to. It was expected. So your psychology adapted. It learned to associate distance with safety, control with survival. When no one depends on you, nothing can quietly overtake your life. This is why your reaction is immediate and physical. Your body recognizes patterns before your mind explains them. When closeness begins to solidify, the alarm goes off. Leaving restores authorship. It gives you your time back, your internal space. You don't have to manage expectations or maintain a version of yourself that someone else is relying on. This pattern isn't about disliking people. It's about protecting a self that learned early what it cost to be needed. Distance became the one reliable way to stay intact. And because it worked once, your mind keeps offering it, long after the original conditions have passed. There's an identity you're quietly guarding. The one who is capable, self-directed, unconstrained. Someone who can move if they need to. Someone whose life isn't fixed by other people's needs. Staying threatens that identity. Staying means repetition. It means being seen across time, not just in chosen moments. It means becoming predictable in ways you can't control. There's also the pressure of time. The longer you stay, the heavier it feels. Leaving early preserves the version of you that can still start over cleanly. So motion becomes protection. As long as you keep moving, you don't have to reconcile all the versions of yourself into one. You don't have to decide who you are to someone else. But time keeps asking the same question, even as you avoid it. Who are you willing to stay with? And each time you step away instead of answering, the tension tightens. People sense the boundary, even if they can't name it. They adjust around you. They stop leaning too hard. Relationships remain polite, functional, or situational. Some drift away quietly. Others keep a version of you that exists only in memory. New connections feel easier because the pattern hasn't revealed itself yet. Old ones feel heavier because it has. You're often described as independent, private, hard to read. Those words aren't wrong, but they shape how close people get. You're rarely assumed, rarely woven into someone's everyday life, not because you aren't valued, but because you've taught people not to expect permanence. Over time, the social world around you becomes thinner, not empty, just light. Fewer shared histories, fewer people who know your rhythms. The shape of your relationships mirrors the same choice, repeated, carefully, to stay close enough to matter, but distant enough to leave. There is one cost you feel most clearly, even if you don't dwell on it. It shows up in moments when something good or difficult happens and you pause, unsure who to tell. Not because no one would listen, but because no one is fully there anymore. You have people. You're not alone in the obvious sense. But the web that usually forms from staying, shared history, assumed closeness, the ease of being known without explaining, never quite thickens. You move through life with fewer witnesses. The cost isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself as regret. It feels more like a quiet narrowing, a sense that your life, while controlled, is also lightly held, as if it could disappear without disrupting many other lives. Beneath the leaving, there is a simple request that never learned how to speak directly. It isn't asking for isolation. It's asking for safety without obligation, for connection that doesn't turn into duty, for closeness that doesn't require you to disappear inside it. The fear isn't saying don't love or don't belong. It's asking for proof that staying won't cost you your autonomy, that you won't be absorbed, depended on, or quietly assigned a role you can't step out of. It wants assurance that you're allowed to remain separate even when you're close, that you won't be trapped by expectations that grow faster than consent, that choosing yourself won't automatically mean abandoning someone else. This request has been expressed only through distance, because distance is the one language that has always worked. It has never learned how to ask for space while staying, only how to leave before the asking becomes impossible. At some point, a different way of seeing this pattern begins to form, not as a flaw, but as a strategy that never got updated. Leaving kept you intact when staying meant losing yourself. That logic made sense once. What's less clear is whether the same protection is still serving the same purpose. The situations are different now, even if the feeling arrives unchanged. The danger your body reacts to may no longer be present in the same way. This doesn't mean staying is suddenly easy, or that leaving was a mistake. It means the story you've been telling yourself about control and safety might be incomplete, that there may be more than two options, even if you can't see them yet. The shift isn't toward optimism, it's toward curiosity, toward noticing the moment before you pull away without immediately acting on it, toward recognizing that the urge to leave is information, not a command. Nothing resolves here. The pattern doesn't vanish, but something loosens, the certainty that distance is the only way to remain yourself. Later, you're alone in a familiar room. The day has ended quietly. Your phone lights up with a message you haven't opened yet. There's no urgency in it, no demand, just a presence reaching out. You don't decide anything right away. You sit with the weight of the moment instead of stepping away from it. You notice how your body reacts, the tension, the reflex, the pause. Outside, life continues at its usual pace. Inside, nothing is resolved, but you remain where you are, aware of the choice without making it yet. And for once, you don't leave the moment before it finishes forming.